The Lakers are good. In fact, the Lakers are scary good. Now, immediately I know if you don't like the Lakers, you'll probably say I'm overreacting, and maybe that's fair. But I believe everything from the numbers to the eye test to previous NBA history all backs up the fact that this current Lakers team is a legitimate contender. Now, I know that word contender gets thrown around a lot, like some people have 10 contenders. Me personally, I only have 4 to 5 contenders in the entire league, but either way, I have a very short list of actual contenders, and I believe the Lakers are one of those contenders. In fact, I'll get into some of the numbers and the reasoning behind why I think the two best teams in the Western Conference are the Thunder and the Lakers. Now, for context, I should point out, I'm not a Lakers fan, I'm a Raptors fan. At the time of making this video, the Lakers had just played the Timberwolves. Sure, I could talk about that game, but really I don't want to focus in on any particular game. I more so want to focus in on how this Lakers team has looked over the past 20 or so games, because in my opinion, that's a more accurate depiction of how this Lakers team is actually playing currently, especially because the majority of those 20 games, Anthony Davis was not playing or was not on the team. So for this video, I'll largely be looking at the past 20 or so games, because I don't think it's that worthwhile to look at the Lakers at the start of the season or just their season-long stats, because it's a very different team. They're also playing a lot better now. So yes, despite the fact it definitely hasn't looked perfect with Luka Doncic quite yet, there's been more than enough promising moments, at least for me, that I genuinely love the direction this team is going into, especially as the playoffs get nearer. Now, let me actually get into some of the numbers with Luka Doncic, but really I'm going to be looking over this past 20 or so games, because in spite of all the narratives out there, over the past 20 games of the season, the Lakers have the #1 rated defense, #1. And obviously, I think the players deserve a lot of credit for buying in, but I also really think that JJ Redick deserves a lot of credit for 1, getting the players to buy in, and 2, having a great scheme for them to buy into. So all of that is to say, I believe that the #1 concern people had about this Lakers roster, about being able to get stops, especially in the playoffs, is overblown, because even if they're not the #1 defense like they have been over the last 20 games, even if their defense slips a tiny bit with Luka Doncic, I believe that the offensive production he will give them will more than make up for even a little bit of slippage in defense, which, to be clear, I don't think Luka Doncic is nearly as bad defensively as people make it out to be. Now I get it, you might say like you're putting too much stock into a 20 game sample size, but I would disagree with that. I think 20 games is a pretty big sample size. That's a quarter of an NBA season. Take for example the Mavericks last season. Well, leading into the playoffs last year, over the last 20 games of the season, the Mavericks had the #1 defense, which again was something that was going heavily unnoticed by the larger NBA media and the larger NBA fandom out there, because again, it's easy to look at narratives. It's easy to look at Luka Doncic doesn't play defense, Kyrie Irving not a great defender, and say certainly they can't be a great defensive unit. But I don't know, what happens if you have a very good defensive scheme? What happens if you have good defensive buy-in from players? I believe you get a very similar thing to what the Lakers have currently. But anyway, I've talked about their defense enough, but to be honest, their defensive rating is not even the main reason I think they're a legitimate contender. In fact, I often think that the best predictor of who the true contenders are is net rating. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, net rating is essentially your offensive rating minus your defensive rating, or I guess to put it more simply, how much your team scores per 100 possessions compared to how much they give up. So the higher a team's net rating is, the better they usually are. For context, the team with the highest net rating of all time are the 96 Chicago Bulls. Some of the other all-time leaders in net rating are the 97 Chicago Bulls, the 2017 Warriors, some of the teams people associate as being the best teams of all time. So the reason I say that is to say, like, net rating at least has some indication of how good you actually are. Now, when looking at this season's leaders in net rating, the Thunder are #1, followed by the Cavaliers, then the Celtics. And those are 3 teams almost everyone has as 3 contenders this year. So I get it, while no stat is perfect and it should definitely be used with other context, generally speaking, the best teams each year that also go the deepest into the playoffs have the best net ratings. So what's the Lakers' net rating this year? Well, over the course of the entire year, they have the 15th best net rating. So they're pretty middle of the pack. Obviously, if I was just going off of that, they would not be a contender. But when looking at the Lakers' net rating over the last 20 games, the Lakers are 3rd in net rating, only behind the Cavaliers and the Thunder. They are just above teams like the Celtics and the Nuggets, Which again, like, it's no coincidence, those are all of the teams people associate as being the teams with the best chance of going deep into the playoffs and potentially winning a championship. I'm actually projecting the Lakers' net rating will only get better with the Luka Doncic addition, because even if he makes their defense slightly worse, I don't think it would be much worse, but I definitely don't believe he'll lower their defensive rating by more than he raises their offensive rating. And even with him slowly working his way back into shape and still not shooting great, in fact he's been shooting kind of poorly, there are so many moments where I feel it's a cheat code having Luka Doncic, LeBron, and Austin Reeves, and yes, I even include Austin Reeves in that, because he's turned into a phenomenal offensive creator. It just feels unfair at points, especially when they're really clicking, and I only expect that to get better and better as Luka is more acclimated to this team over the remainder of the season. And for context, over the last 20 games, while the Lakers have the best defense, they only have the 9th best offense, which isn't bad, but I am projecting they'll have a top offense leading into the playoffs. And to kind of hammer home this point of how important net rating can be, especially when predicting who are the true contenders, even when you look at just last season, the teams with the highest net ratings were the Celtics, then the Thunder, then the Timberwolves, then the Nuggets. Now I think most fans can agree those were 4 of the best teams with the best chances of winning a title last season. In fact, the team with the best net rating won a title. But of course, a team that's noticeably absent from that list are the Dallas Mavericks, who went all the way to the finals. And this is where I think it's important to monitor how different teams, especially playoff caliber teams, might change, especially around the trade deadline with different acquisitions, or even monitor which teams maybe are dealing with more injuries and stuff like that. Because last season, the Mavericks were a team that was riddled with injuries, and then even with all those injuries, they made massive changes at the trade deadline. So as I said, they would close out the season with the #1 defense, but they would also close out the season with the #1 net rating. So the reason I bring that up is because I want to reinforce the point that it can be useful to look at smaller sample sizes, especially when teams change. And I think the Lakers might be a team that, especially when you look at them over a smaller sample size, are significantly better than people actually think, aside from Lakers fans. So yes, I say all that to say right now, over the last 20 games, I believe the Lakers have shown that they are a top 2 team in the Western Conference. If you want to say OKC should still be the favorite in the West, fully understand that. But I believe OKC and the Lakers are the 2 top contenders to come out of the West. And then of course I mentioned some of the numbers, but let's not overcomplicate it. The Lakers have Luka Doncic and LeBron James on the same team, because even in these few games that they've played together, you've seen the offensive brilliance. Even in this last game, some of the passes these two are making, the way they're kind of maneuvering around each other, really helping each other with the gravity each one provides the other one. And that doesn't even mention some of the other key players like Austin Reeves. But one of the biggest reasons I'm incredibly high on this team is JJ Redick. Like, sure, JJ Redick might be a first-year head coach, but I am genuinely impressed by the coaching job he's done. All of that is to say, I believe the Lakers are one of the legitimate contenders this year. But what do you think? Maybe you agree, maybe you disagree. Please share your thoughts. And if you want to see more of these videos, please like and subscribe, and thank you for watching.